Senator Scott, thank you so much for joining us and spending a few moments with the Heritage Foundation today.
Well, thank you for all your hard work. So you guys do a great job. You have a great team.
Well, your state and our country is preparing for a momentous day with the NASA and SpaceX launch on Saturday. You are planning to be in Cape Canaveral for it. I wanted to begin by asking what a successful launch would mean for America's space program.
Well, first off, I went yesterday. I took my 8-year-old grandson. We were excited because he's told me after I took him to the Kennedy Space Center last year that he's going to be the first man on Mars. So he's all excited. So we're going to go back on Saturday. But think about what it's doing. First off, when I became governor, you have to remember, Obama had just shut down manned flight, and we'd lost over 7,000 jobs in that area. So we recruited Blue Origin, SpaceX, Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, all to come in, and Kennedy Space Center did a great job allowing in the private sector, and now it's a robust area. And now, for the first time since 2011, we're going to send men to the space station, and it's going to be a private company that's doing it. So it's pretty exciting. I look forward to going back on Saturday. I want everybody to be safe, and I want this to be a big success.
Well, we look forward to watching it, and we agree. It's a momentous moment for the United States, and certainly we'll be watching closely. Well, you've been a leading voice against state bailouts, and yet there is increasing pressure on Washington to step in and help. What's the message that you are sending to states and governors who are asking to be bailed out?
Well, first off, the first thing every governor ought to be doing is figuring out how to get their economy going again. I was a governor. I got elected at the exact same time Andrew Cuomo got elected as governor of New York. And here's the choice. It's in my 8 years, we paid off a third of state debt. In his 8 years, he increased the state debt. We reduced taxes every year. He didn't reduce taxes. People just keep leaving the state because his taxes are too high. He's got almost the highest taxes in the country. He's never balance his budget. They always remember in school, they always told us, oh yeah, the states had to balance their budget. No, they balance their budget by borrowing more money. And that's what he's done. So now he's, even though we've given either in funding or loans over $1 trillion to our states and locals because of coronavirus, he wants more. I mean, he doesn't want to be responsible for any problems he has. He wants the federal taxpayer, not the New York taxpayer, but all of us to pay for his problems. It's not fair to people in Florida who moved out of New York or out of Illinois or New Jersey or California to say, oh, yeah, now the governors are going to come back and get you, even though you're in Florida, to pay for their excesses because they don't want to live within their means. We've given them $150 billion to deal with coronavirus. Actually, that's 100% of their cost. With hurricanes that I had, the federal government doesn't pay all my costs, and they clearly never covered any of my revenue loss. We've given them $50 billion for Medicaid, and not even knowing if their Medicaid costs are going up. $30 billion for their school systems, not even knowing if those costs are going up, on top of over $270 billion to other state and local programs, and we're lending them $500 billion. What else do they want? I mean, they've got to start living within their means, and I am not going to let Florida taxpayers pay for Andrew Cuomo's excesses. It's not right.
Last year, on a similar topic, you worked with the Heritage Foundation to produce a series of videos about Washington's wasteful spending. You shared many of the examples from your time as Florida's governor. How are you trying to elevate this issue, both with taxpayers and your colleagues in Congress?
Well, the biggest thing is, in the Senate, your job is to go promote what you believe in. And so that's what I do. I go out there and talk about the fact, how can we be leaving this unbelievable amount of debt to our children and our grandchildren? This year, we're going to end up with, $26 trillion worth of debt. I mean, it's unbelievable what we're doing. We can't do that. We have got to live within our means. It's hard. It's hard. I walked in as governor with a $4 billion budget deficit, but I balanced it and started cutting taxes the first year. Did I make everybody happy? No. But what we did, we said, how can we get the most important things done and get a return on the tax dollars? We went line through the budget, 4,000 lines of the budget in Florida. And we said, what are we getting what we're paying for? And if we're not, we're going to stop doing it. And so I'm trying to do that, the same thing at the federal government. how do we make sure that we can get a return on every dollar of federal, every dollar? I mean, everybody says, oh, unless you focus on the biggest things, it doesn't change. Yeah, it does. If you focus on every dollar, you will eventually get this, get this budget in line. That's what I'm going to do. I talked to my colleagues about it. We put out videos together about it. I have bills to deal with it, and I'm going to fight for the American taxpayer every day, because we cannot do this to our children and our grandchildren.
Well, looking at the economic recovery from COVID-19, as you know, the Heritage Foundation has created the National Coronavirus Recovery Commission and put forward recommendations for reopening our country both safely while focusing on protecting both lives and livelihoods. Florida has been on the leading edge of this. What has the experience been like there, and what can the rest of the country learn from Florida?
Well, first, I want to thank Heritage for doing that. We've got to get this conversation going. How do we open up all states? How do we do this safely? How do we make sure Americans still have their rights and their livelihood? We've got to do these things. So here's what I think why Florida has done well. We deal with disasters. You know, we have hurricanes, we've had a healthcare crisis, and we figure out how to deal with these things. We figure out what is the problem, how do we solve the problem. I can tell you, in Florida, people are anxious to get back to a normal life. Now, all the kids, I talked to my grandson, he wasn't so anxious to get back to school, but they're all anxious to get back to a normal life. They're anxious to get their businesses open and go to restaurants, go to Disney World, go to the beach, go to these things. But they know they have to do it safely. They want to get back in church. They know they have to social distance. They know they have to wear masks. And that's what we're doing here. I think that's why it's working in Florida. Now, we're not through with this. We don't have a vaccine yet. We don't have enough testing. I had the COVID-19 test for the first time yesterday. I'll be glad when that's readily available to everybody. The antibody test is becoming readily available. There's a lot of work to do, but I'm excited what's happening in Florida. Our economy is reopening.
Senator, what is the proper role for government when it comes to imposing stay-at-home orders? I know that you've spoken out about personal responsibility and having more trust in the American people.
Well, first off, I went through this with hurricanes, right? When I was governor, I had 4 hurricanes, and my job was to give every Floridian, every visitor, as much information as possible and tell you the risk. And people took that seriously. With Irma, we had 6 million people evacuate because I explained, here's what the storm surge is going to be, here's what the winds are going to be, here's what the rain's going to be. This is what first responders can do, and this is what first responders can't do. You're probably going to lose power. I just kept educating people. That's the biggest thing government can do. First off, the American public is pretty smart. I grew up in a very poor family. My mom has an 11th grade education. I don't even know my dad. My adopted dad had a 6th grade education. They didn't have money, but they were smart. They had good common sense, and they knew what risks to take and what risks not to take. That's what the American public is. And by the way, we have rights. Right? We have, as an example, our churches. We need to be able to worship. We've got the First Amendment. It says that we can express our religion. On top of that, as a family, our family's making decisions about our safety. Our businesses are making decisions about how they make their customers and their employees safe. This would be, what government can do is get the testing done right, get the vaccine done as quickly as possible, keep us informed as much as you can, and let us make good decisions, and we'll figure this out. The American public is pretty smart.
You have a new bill that would prevent China from stealing America's COVID-19 vaccine research. What would it do, and why is it needed?
Well, the reason it's needed is that we have evidence that China is trying to sabotage, communist China, remember, communist China is trying to sabotage our development or delay our development of the vaccine. I think it's really important that whether it's America or Europe or Australia, one of us has this vaccine, because we know we're going to share it with the world. And we also know communist China won't. So my bill is real simple. If you're a Chinese student and you're going to come into the country and you're going to be doing research or doing anything with regard to the development of the vaccine, then you're going to be vetted to make sure that you're not going to sabotage Americans' ability to develop this vaccine. I mean, think about it. What's really important long term is we got to get this vaccine done. We got to figure out our therapeutics to make sure we keep people alive. So, I mean, communist China is not our friend. They've made the decision. It's a decision that the General Secretary Xi has made of the Communist Party to be our adversary. They steal our jobs. They steal our technology. They put people in prison for their religion. You can see right now they're taking away the basic rights that were granted the citizens of Hong Kong, and they lied to us about this pandemic, and now they're trying to delay or sabotage our development of the vaccine. They're clearly our adversary now, and it's too bad that the government of Communist China is doing this. It's like we're in a new Cold War.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned Hong Kong. Just yesterday, Secretary Pompeo declared that Hong Kong no longer has autonomy from China. What does the future hold for Hong Kong, given recent developments there?
You know, I went and met with the protesters last year, and I met with a lot of them that have come to the United States. I met with the government of Hong Kong. I met with religious leaders, business leaders, and your heart goes out to what's happening right now. Their basic rights are being trampled on by the Communist Party of China. They were granted these when Hong Kong was turned over from the British to Communist China, and now Communist China, under the General Secretary Xi again of the Communist Party, has decided just to trample on them. So I think it's going to devastate their economy. But the biggest thing is we want everybody in the world to have the same rights we have, to live in freedom, to have personal freedom and rights like our Bill of Rights. And right now, you know, in Communist China, the individuals there don't have them, and now they're trying to do the same thing in Hong Kong. And my belief is that you know, the General Secretary of the Communist Party, Xi, he's in for world domination, and it's Hong Kong first, and who will be next? We got to stand up against what they're doing.
Senator Scott, thanks so much for spending a few moments with the Heritage Foundation today and your leadership on these issues.
Well, first off, I want to thank Rob, I want to thank everybody at the Heritage Foundation for what you do. You are an important voice to make sure we have a country like I grew up in, where you could grow up, you could live in public housing, and you could be anything. And you can't do that if we don't live by the principles this country was developed on. So thank you very much for what you're doing.